The problem of a country that had not known defeat, that had not known a war that could be visible to it. And then the war started coming home. And it came home in many forms. First in the form of the caskets that came home, the men on the crutches. It came home in the form of $200 billion lost on a war, fighting a people who would not lose. Finally, it began to come home to roost in the form of counterinsurgency chickens coming home to roost. Watergate was the result. I think one of the lessons of Vietnam that should be drawn, and I do not know if the universities are drawing it, that they should try to teach the people of America, the children of America, the meaning of tragedy, the meaning of agony, of war, of death, of exploitation, of oppression. For once, the invisible war should have become visible to them. I refer to Zanu and to Chitepo and to Moriwa because there are still invisible wars being fought. But to whom are they invisible? These are terms they have used, friends. I mean, I'm rambling. But these are terms they are used in Pentagon and in the State Department and by Dr. Kissinger and by President Ford and by President Nixon. They use terms like invisible wars. They used to say forgotten wars, a successful guerrilla war, a successful war of counterinsurgency is an invisible war. It's a forgotten war. Invisible to whom? The war in Laos was not invisible. And that's the crux of the national security problems. The war in Laos was not invisible to the Laotians, who received exactly the same amount of tonnage between 1964 and 1969 in 5 years. They received the same amount of tonnage in bombs that was expended in all of World War II by all the combatants. But the American people didn't know about it until '69, when the Mansfield report came out from the Senate, said that the American Air Force had been bombing Laos without the knowledge of the American public. So the invisible war was not invisible to the Laotians who were dying, half of whom were rendered homeless, 3/4 of whose villages had been destroyed by American bombing. It was invisible to the American public. And what does keeping a war invisible involve? It involves deceit, not of the Laotians. It involves killing the Laotians, but deceiving the American people. It involves covert operations. It involves the growing power of the CIA. It involves the growing power of the military. It involves the growing power for the Pentagon. It involves shifting military intelligence into naval intelligence into Air Force intelligence back to CIA, and CIA back to naval intelligence, and so on and so forth. It involves creating air forces and producing new armies paid by American taxpayers that Americans know nothing about. Essentially, what then it involves a subversion. It involved a clear-cut, deliberate subversion of the democratic process by President Kennedy, by President Johnson, and ultimately Nixon got caught because he brought the chickens home to roost. The process has to stop. But the point is that it hasn't stopped.